I still remember the exact moment the room stopped breathing. It wasn't a graceful pause, like the hush before a bride walks down the aisle. No, it was the kind of silence that slams the air out of your lungs, the kind that dares you to sit still while every cell in your body screams, "Leave." I was sitting at the edge of the third table from the front, next to the dessert tower that no one had touched yet. My hands were folded neatly in my lap, like I was preparing to accept some invisible award for best-behaved disappointment. And then it happened. Emily, the bride, lifted her champagne glass, flashing a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and said into the mic, "I just want to thank everyone who supported Liam and me, especially his family, even his sister, the single mom tag-along." The room chuckled. A few forks paused midair, but she wasn't done. She added with a laugh, "Seriously, she's like our emotional support animal. We should have put her in a little vest and sat her at the kids' table." Laughter cracked like thunder. And then, from my right, from someone who should have known better, I heard my own mother, Janice. She didn't say much, just leaned into her champagne and added with a snort, "Like a scratched label dress on final sale. You keep it around, but never wear it outside." That one hit harder than the bride's, because I'd heard that exact phrase before, in middle school, from the girls who used to mock my thrift store jeans. Only this time, it wasn't strangers. It was my mother, my family, and the guests. Polished, perfect, glittering in their formal wear. They laughed. Not all, but enough. Enough to feel like I was drowning in their judgment. I sat still, my hands clenched under the table, nails digging into my palm. I could feel the sting of tears building behind my eyes, but I didn't blink. I wouldn't give them that. I just stared ahead, at nothing, and counted backwards from 10. 10, 9. Breathe. 8. 7. Don't cry. 6. 5. Smile, if you can. 4. 3. You're not here. You're invisible. Just like always. Until I felt a soft tug on my sleeve. I looked down. Noah. My son. 9 years old, sitting beside me in a slightly oversized gray suit and clip-on tie he'd picked, out himself. His fingers were still sticky from the mini cannoli he'd been eating. His cheeks were flushed. His eyes, wide, brown, honest, looked up at me like I was the only person in the room that mattered. "Mom?" he whispered. "Why are they laughing? At you?" I tried to smile. God, I tried. But my mouth twitched, and I felt something crack inside, like a dam behind my ribs. I couldn't answer him, because how do you explain to a child that people laugh when they see weakness? That family can be crueler than strangers? That sometimes the ones who raised you are the first to tear you down? Instead, I brushed a hand over his hair, still soft from the gel he'd insisted on that morning, and said, "It's nothing, baby. Just wedding stuff." He didn't believe me. I could see it in the way his little brows knit together. He didn't say another word. He just looked at me for a long second, then pushed his chair back. At first, I thought he was going to the restroom. Or maybe to get more cake. But then, he kept walking. Not toward the dessert table. Not toward the exit. Toward the stage. My heart jumped. "Noah," I hissed under my breath, reaching out, but he was already weaving between chairs, careful not to bump anyone. The music had stopped. The microphone had been laid on the table beside Emily's bouquet, which rested like a crown she hadn't earned. And my son, my sweet, soft-spoken son, was walking straight toward it. The DJ leaned down, trying to intercept him. "Hey, buddy, maybe let the grown-ups..." But before he could finish, a voice cut through the room. Liam, my brother, the groom. He was still seated, hands folded, face unreadable, but his voice was calm, sharp. Let him speak. Silence, even Emily. who had been mid-laugh with her bridesmaids, froze. Noah stepped up. His tiny hand reached for the mic. I stood, halfway, not knowing what to do. I wanted to run up there, scoop him into my arms, say, "It's okay, baby, we're leaving, you don't have to do this." But something in me stayed still, because something in him was standing taller than I'd ever seen. He took the mic, both hands around it. The room watched. No one breathed, and then he said, "I know something about the bride." I don't think anyone in the room blinked after he said it. Not Emily, not Liam, not me. "I know something about the bride." His voice didn't waver. It didn't shout. He just said it. Like a quiet stone dropped into a still lake, and I sat there, unable to move. Because as much as I wanted to leap up and pull him away from that stage, a deeper part of me knew. This moment didn't start here, it started this morning. I woke up before the alarm. The house was quiet, that kind of nervous quiet before a storm. I padded barefoot across the cold kitchen tiles, trying to keep my breathing steady. Noah was still asleep, curled up like a comma in his little twin bed. I stood in front of the mirror and stared at myself for a long time before putting anything on. My face looked tired. Not bad, just older than I remembered. Like life had run its fingers across me and left prints I couldn't wash off. The dress was from a clearance rack, a little too tight at the hips, a little too sparkly for my taste. But it was the nicest thing I owned. I tugged at the zipper twice before it closed. The seams strained slightly when I exhaled. "It'll do," I told the reflection. I was still adjusting the neckline when Noah walked in, yawning and rubbing his eyes. He stopped in the doorway and just stared. "You look like a movie star," he said softly, almost surprised. I smiled at him through the mirror. "Thanks, baby. You're my favorite hype man." The drive to the venue was quiet. Noah hummed along with a song on the radio, legs swinging gently from the edge of his booster seat. He looked so proud in his little suit. He asked if Uncle Liam would cry. I told him probably. Weddings were scary. I didn't say what I was really thinking. Family is scarier. Liam and I were close once, 5 years younger, but always my shadow. After our dad left, it was just the two of us and Mom. And really, just the two of us. I walked him to school, helped with his math homework, let him crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I was his sister and his protector, and then Emily happened. She was the kind of woman who could turn any room into her stage. Beautiful, composed, always aware of how she looked from every angle. She'd walk into family dinners with that effortless grace, the kind that made you feel like you needed to apologize just for being there. She was always polite to me, but never kind. "It's so inspiring," she said once at dinner, "that you're doing this all on your own, raising a kid. I mean, you're so brave." Brave. Like I was a shelter dog who managed to chew through her leash and survive. My mom loved her, instantly. Janice would lean in when Emily talked, nodding, laughing, even at the boring stories. She never looked at me like that. With me, she was clipped. Cold. Like everything I did reminded her of something she didn't want to remember. I used to think I was imagining it, that I was too sensitive. But today proved I wasn't. When we arrived at the venue, it was like stepping into a fairy tale. White roses, candlelight flickering off glass, violin music drifting in the background. Everything gleamed. Except me. I spent the whole reception pretending I belonged there. I kept my back straight. I laughed at jokes I didn't find funny. I smiled at people who didn't remember my name. I adjusted my dress every time I sat down so it wouldn't wrinkle. I told Noah, "Don't spill, sweetie," every 10 minutes like it was a prayer. And I kept looking for Liam. But he never came to me. Not once. Not even to say hi. He was always with Emily or her bridesmaids or our mother, laughing, smiling, never looking back. At one point, I found myself by the restroom, alone. I watched my reflection in the hallway mirror. Mascara still. Okay. Lipstick not smudged. But my eyes, I looked like someone visiting a party she wasn't invited to. That was also the moment I saw Noah walking out of a hallway quietly. He looked thoughtful. I didn't think much of it. I smiled, fixed his little collar, and took his hand as we walked back to our table. I didn't know then what he'd heard. I didn't know that was the moment everything changed. Now, back in the present, he stood on stage, his fingers curled. Gently around the microphone, he glanced at me, just for a heartbeat, and something passed between us. Not fear. Not permission, conviction. Like he was saying, "You taught me to speak the truth. I'm just doing what you said to do." I felt the air in the room stretch, tight, silent. Emily's smile had faltered, her posture stiffened. And me? I couldn't breathe because something was coming. And my son, my quiet, kind, beautiful boy, was the one about to say it. Noah took a slow breath. Both hands gripped the microphone stand like it was holding him upright. His jacket sleeves dangled slightly past his wrists, and his shoes didn't quite reach the floor behind the lectern. He looked small. Too small for that stage. And yet, something in his posture made him look 10 feet tall. His voice was soft, but it cut clean through the silence. I know something about the bride. A ripple moved through the room, a breath, a shuffle, the sound of someone exhaling too loudly. Emily let out a little laugh. "The fake kind." "What are you talking about, sweetheart?" she said, her tone laced with sweetness so sharp it could cut glass. Her eyes flicked to Liam, then to the guests, her shoulders stiff beneath her beaded gown. But Noah didn't answer her. He looked at me instead. And in his eyes, I saw everything. Confusion, yes. But also fire, quiet fire, protection, hurt, and something deeper, conviction. He turned back to the microphone. "Before the wedding," he said, steady now. "I went to find the bathroom. I passed by this room. The door was open, and I heard her talking." Emily's smile twitched. Her hand tightened around the stem of her champagne flute. "She was on the phone with someone," Noah continued. "Or maybe just talking to her friend. But she didn't see me." The tension was no longer subtle. You could feel it in the way people sat up straighter. The scrape of a fork being slowly set down. A man near the back leaned forward, eyes narrowed. Emily opened her mouth, then shut it again. Noah's voice didn't shake. She said she didn't really want to marry Uncle Liam. Gasps, actual, audible gasps, fluttered through the air like birds startled into flight. Emily's entire face changed. Her skin went pale, mouth slightly agape. Noah pressed on. She said she needed someone stable, someone who'd give her a house and not ask too many questions. Liam's jaw clenched. Emily looked at him, shaking her head minutely. "No, that's not. This is being blown out of." Noah kept speaking, his voice slow and careful, like he didn't want to get even one word wrong. "She said Uncle Liam is too nice, that he wouldn't say no when she goes out late, that he's easy to control. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire no one noticed until now. Emily stepped forward, voice tightening. "Okay, wait. This is ridiculous. He's 9. He probably misunderstood. He's just a child." She laughed again, louder, more brittle. But no one laughed with her, and Noah, my son, paused. He looked at Emily, then at Liam, then at me, and then at the guests. "She said my mom shouldn't have been invited." His voice dropped lower. "She said she's embarrassed by her. That people like my mom don't belong here, and that once they were married, she'd make sure we never showed up again." The silence now was thicker than sound. It was shame. Suspended. Heavy. Emily's hand dropped to her side. Her lips moved, but no words came out. Noah's gaze lifted. Again. But she's wrong, he added quietly. My mom is brave, and kind, and strong. And she never says mean things about anyone, not even when people hurt her. My hand flew to my mouth. I couldn't hold the tears anymore. They slid down my cheeks, hot and relentless. Not from pain, but from something bigger. Something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Being seen. Noah looked down then, like his job was done. He let the mic go gently, like it might bruise if he dropped it too hard. Emily finally found her voice. You people are seriously listening to this? She hissed, eyes flashing. It's a child's version of some overheard. But before she could finish, another voice rang out from the crowd. Clear, calm, I heard her too. Every head turned. Rachel. Liam's childhood friend. Once a bridesmaid in every family event, until Emily pushed her out. She stood now, arms folded, eyes burning. I went to bring her shoes. I was in the hallway. She didn't see me either. Emily's face twisted, part rage, part horror. Rachel didn't stop. She said exactly what Noah just said. Word for word, she was laughing. A loud murmur broke through. The silence like shattered glass. Chairs shifted. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some guests looked at Emily, others looked at Liam, but no one looked at me. Not with pity. With something closer to respect. Emily stepped forward, reaching for Liam's hand. Come on, you know this isn't true. You're really going to take the word of a little kid and some jealous. He pulled his hand back. Not harsh, not loud, just removed it. And I saw it. The exact second his heart broke. Not because of what Noah said, but because it confirmed what he already feared. He turned to his bride. Did you say that? He asked, voice cracking down the middle. She froze. Tears welled in her eyes. But not grief. Panic. Liam, you're not thinking clearly. This is our wedding, please. He shook, his head slowly. I asked you so many times, he whispered. If you loved me, if you were sure. She stepped forward again. You're going to throw everything away over a child's... That child, he said, cutting her off gently, just told the truth. Something none of us had the courage to do. The room fell silent again. Not awkward, not tense, just real. And in the middle of it all, my 9-year-old son stepped down from the stage, straight-backed, unapologetic. He walked back toward our table, toward me, and the applause started, soft at first, one person, then another. And then the whole room, not for a wedding, not for the cake cutting, but for a boy who stood up and said what grown adults were too afraid to say out loud. Emily stood frozen, not crying, not yelling, just frozen. Like someone who'd been caught, mid-lie, and suddenly realized the whole room had heard her. She looked around like the walls were closing in, eyes darting to her bridesmaids, to her mother, to anyone who might step in and rescue her. No one moved. Liam stood still, too. His face was unreadable now, not angry, not soft, just undone. You said all that? He asked again, his voice lower this time. Frayed. Emily blinked rapidly, her voice finally returning in short, defensive bursts. Liam, come on, he's a kid. He doesn't even understand what he heard. You're seriously going to believe that? Over me! He didn't answer. So she kept going, each word sharper than the last. This is ridiculous. This isn't even about me. This is about her. She pointed toward me now. She's always hated me. She probably told him what to say. The Tayu guests gasped, not because of her accusation, but because of the desperation in her voice. And because in a room full of lies, only Noah had spoken with clarity. Liam finally spoke. "You know what's strange?" he said, turning slowly toward her. "I wanted to defend you. I was ready to. Until you started talking." She flinched. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. Quiet had already done the damage. "I asked you so many times if you were sure. You always smiled. You always said yes. But now?" His voice broke slightly. "Now I think I already knew the truth. I just didn't want to see it." Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling. "So what? You're calling off the wedding because your sister's little boy had a dramatic moment?" "Liam, it's me. You're going to ruin everything because of a 9-year-old's fairy tale?" A beat of silence. And then, from the back of the room, someone stood up. Rachel, the woman who had once been Liam's best friend. The one quietly pushed away after Emily entered the picture. She didn't yell, she just spoke. "It wasn't a fairy tale," she said. "I heard it too." Every head turned. Emily's mouth opened, then shut. A flicker of panic crossed her face. Rachel walked forward. "I was coming to the suite with your shoes. You didn't see me. But you said, all of it, that you'd never love him the way he loved you, that you needed a man who wouldn't ask questions, and that once you married him, you'd clean up the family mess." Her eyes found mine. "I knew what you meant." Emily looked like she'd been slapped. Her hands dropped to her sides. Her shoulders shrank. But her voice rose again, shrill now, cracking at the edges. "Oh my God! Are you people seriously doing this to me? On my wedding night? This is insane. You're just jealous, all of you." No one replied. That silence, the one that started the night, had returned. But this time, it wasn't humiliating. It was honest, exposing, and no one rushed to save her. Not even her parents. Emily looked at Liam, eyes glassy now. "Please," she whispered. "Say something. Don't just stand there." Liam looked down at his hands, then up at me, and something shifted in his expression, like someone waking up from a long, comfortable dream and realizing they're standing in the middle of a storm. He turned back to her. "I believed in us," he said, his voice so calm it was almost cruel. "But I believe in truth more. And right now, the only person who told the truth tonight was 9 years old." Emily stared at him. For 1 second, I thought she might collapse. But she didn't. She lifted her chin, adjusted her dress, and without another word, turned and walked out. Her heels clicked against the marble floor like a clock winding down. Tick, 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 and then silence until a hand clapped. Once, then again, then another, and suddenly the entire room was applauding. Not loud. Not explosive, but steady. Not for the bride, not even for the groom, but for the boy who had stood on a stage, wrapped in a too-big jacket, and told the truth when no one else dared to. I sat there, hand over my mouth, tears pouring freely now. Not from pain, from something else. Relief, pride, maybe even joy. Noah climbed back into his seat beside me and leaned his head gently against my arm. I looked down at him, and he looked up, eyes sleepy now. "Did I do okay?" he asked. I couldn't speak. I just nodded and held his hand tighter than I ever had. Because for the first time in my life, someone had stood up for me, and it was my son. I don't remember much about what happened after the applause. It didn't feel like a celebration. Not really. It felt like the end of a long performance where the actors dropped their masks, walked off stage, and left only the truth behind. Some guests filtered toward the bar, some toward the exit. Others sat, dazed, as if they'd witnessed something they couldn't explain. No one went after Emily, and no one looked at me with pity. For the first time in years, They looked at me like I belonged. Liam came over quietly. Had just finished wiping the tears off my cheeks with a cocktail napkin when I saw him standing there. Hands in his pockets, tie loosened, face drawn. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then he reached out and pulled me into a hug. Not the kind of hug you give out of politeness. The kind that says, "I see you now, and I'm sorry it took me this long." His voice was muffled into my shoulder. "I should have protected you." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat was too full of tears I hadn't cried in years. So I just held on. To my brother. To the moment. To the small piece of healing finally, starting to take root. We didn't talk long. He said he was postponing the honeymoon, that he needed time to think, time to breathe. I told him I understood, and for once, I didn't mean, "I forgive you." I meant, "We're not pretending anymore." And that felt like enough. Later that night. After I thanked the few people who came up with soft words and quiet apologies, Noah and I walked hand in hand through the almost empty parking lot. The venue glowed faintly behind us, like a fairy tale that had burned itself out. I strapped him into the back seat. He looked tired, not cranky tired, but the kind of tired you get when you've just been incredibly brave. As I slid into the driver's seat, I glanced into the rearview mirror. He was watching me, eyes wide, quiet, curious. "You okay, baby?" I asked. He nodded. Then, after a pause, "Are you okay, Mommy?" That question hit me harder than anything Emily or Janice said, because it wasn't about the insult, or the silence, or even the truth that had been exposed. It was about me. And I realized something in that moment. I wasn't embarrassed. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the scratched label anymore. I was just me. And for the first time, that felt like enough. I smiled at him. "Yeah, I think I am." At home, I tucked him into bed the way I always did, brushed his hair back, kissed his forehead, pulled the blanket up to his chin. But I lingered a little. Longer this time. "Noah?" I whispered. He blinked sleepily. "Yeah? I'm so proud of you. What you did tonight. It was brave. It was everything." He smiled, small and soft, and mumbled, "You taught me." And then he was asleep. I sat in the hallway after that. Just sat. In the silence of our tiny apartment, the leaky faucet dripping, the hum of the fridge, the sound of nothing urgent. And I cried again. Not because I was broken, but because I had survived, and because my son saw me as more than what the world tried to label me, not single mom, not family burden, just his mom. And that was everything. People always say weddings bring families together, but I think that night, it did something better. It pulled the masks off. It revealed who was willing to laugh at cruelty, and who was willing to stand in front of it. That night, I didn't lose anything. I gained clarity. I gained truth. And I gained the kind of pride no expensive dress, no table placement, no social approval could ever give me. Because it turns out, I wasn't the scratched label. I was the only one who refused to sell her integrity for a seat at the table, and the person who reminded me of that was a 9-year-old boy in a clip-on tie, holding my hand, telling the truth. For both of us. If this story moved you, if you've ever sat in silence while others laughed at your pain, if you've ever wished someone would stand up and say, "She matters," then share this. Let someone else feel seen. And if you want more real, raw, honest stories about finding your voice, even in the quietest room, subscribe, because the truth deserves to be heard. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.